The Great Displacement, Humanity's Last Stand in the South. The Final Flight. The frost creeps across the reinforced glass of a last departing flight from London Heathrow. Inside the cabin, the silence is heavy, broken only by the synchronized gasps of passengers as they look down. Below them, the once glimmering lights of the European metropolis are being swallowed by a relentless, blinding white void. There is no power, no heat, and soon there will be no oxygen for those left behind. Thousands of miles away, the shores of northern Australia are visible on radar, a land of sweltering heat that has suddenly become the most valuable real estate on Earth. The world is tilting, not on its axis, but in its survival. The descent into white. For decades, the Northern Hemisphere dictated the pace of human civilization. New York, London, Tokyo, and Paris were the beating hearts of finance, culture, and power. But the Great Freeze changed everything in a matter of months. What began as an unusually harsh winter transformed into a permanent glacial advancement. Scientific models failed to predict the speed at which the North Atlantic current would stall, plunging North America and Europe into an inescapable ice age. As the mercury dropped to levels incompatible with human biology, the realization set in: the North was no longer habitable. The infrastructure that once supported billions, central heating, power grids, and transportation, crumbled under the weight of mountains of snow. The Great Migration did not begin with a plan, it began with a panic. The southward surge. The logistics of moving 3 billion people across the equator are beyond anything humanity has ever attempted. The Southern Hemisphere, long viewed by the North as a resource hub or a vacation destination, suddenly found itself the target of a desperate global exodus. Australia, Brazil, Argentina, and the nations of Central Africa became the new promised lands. The migration routes are treacherous. Fleets of ships, from massive tankers converted into floating cities to small fishing boats, clog the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. In the skies, every functional aircraft is pushed to its mechanical limit, ferrying those who can afford the passage and many who cannot to the warmth of the South. A new political frontier. The arrival of billions of refugees has shattered the old geopolitical status quo. The northern superpowers, once the arbiters of global law, now exist as governments in exile. In the bustling, humid streets of Luanda and the crowded suburbs of Brisbane, former world leaders now negotiate for space and resources with their southern hosts. The southern nations find themselves in an unprecedented position of power. Brazil and Argentina have formed a unified South American bloc to manage the influx of European migrants, implementing strict labor and integration laws. In Africa, a new continental union has emerged, utilizing the vast mineral wealth of the interior to build instant cities capable of housing millions. The power dynamic has flipped completely. The South is no longer the developing world, it is the only world left. The climax, the struggle for the equator. Tensions reach a boiling point at the buffer zones. As the ice continues its southward march, the habitable land near the equator becomes the site of intense competition. Resources like fresh water and arable land, once taken for granted, are now more precious than gold. In the temporary megacities sprawling across the Australian outback, social friction is inevitable. Scientists and engineers from the north work side by side with local laborers to terraform the desert, racing against time to create food systems that can feed the surging population. Every day is a battle against resource depletion. The global economy has shifted from a digital, service-based model to a raw survivalist economy. The stock markets of the past are replaced by the calorie markets of the present. The peak of the crisis arrives when the final northern outposts, including the last bastions in southern Japan and the Mediterranean, send out their final distress signals. The South is now the sole custodian of the human species. The pressure on the infrastructure of nations like Indonesia and Kenya is immense, leading to the creation of the first global resource authority. This body, headquartered in Brasilia, now makes the decisions that determine who eats, where people live, and how the last of the Earth's warmth is shared. The cultural meltdown. The migration is not just a movement of bodies, it is a collision of cultures. In the markets of Nairobi, one can hear a dozen European languages mixing with local dialects. The traditions of the North, the winter festivals, the fashion, the architecture, are being adapted to the tropical heat. It's a strange, hybrid world. The memory of the Old North is fading into legend, a story told to children born in the warmth of the South about a land of white powder and biting wind that their ancestors once called home. The conclusion? A warm horizon. As the years pass, the Great Migration stabilizes, but the world is forever changed. The Northern Hemisphere remains a silent, frozen tomb, preserved in ice. Human history has entered a new chapter, one centered around the Southern Cross and the tropical sun. The Great Shift proved that when faced with extinction, the barriers of nation and race become secondary to the instinct for survival. Humanity has survived, but the cost was the world it spent millennia building. Now, looking out over the lush green forests of the Congo or the sun-drenched plains of Queensland, the survivors realize that the future is not in the stars, but in the heat of the equator. The South is no longer just a destination, it is the final home of a resilient, transformed species.